My fiancé left me for my cousin, then they asked me to pay for their wedding. I'm sitting across from my best friend at our favorite cafe when she suddenly says, "You have to tell people what happened. No one would believe it if they didn't hear it from you." I laughed because, honestly, if someone else told me this story, I'd probably think they were exaggerating. But every single word is true, so here's how my fiancé left me for my own cousin. And somehow expected me to help pay for the happiest day of their lives. It all started about 2 years ago. Back then, I thought I had everything figured out. I was 28, had a stable job as a project manager, rented a cozy apartment, and had been dating my fiancé, Ethan, for almost 4 years. Everyone loved Ethan. He was charming in that effortless way. The kind of person who remembered everyone's birthday, helped elderly neighbors carry groceries, and somehow made strangers laugh within minutes of meeting them. My parents adored him. My coworkers constantly asked when we were getting married. Even my extended family treated him like he was already part of the family, including my cousin, Chloe. Now, Chloe and I grew up together. We weren't sisters, but we were close enough that everyone assumed we were. We spent holidays together, summer vacations, family reunions. As kids, we'd sleep in the same room during Christmas gatherings and whisper until 3 in the morning about school crushes and ridiculous dreams. She was the person I trusted with every secret. Or at least, I thought she was. Looking back now, there were probably warning signs. I just ignored them because I trusted the people closest to me. Whenever Ethan and I visited family events, Chloe always found a reason to sit beside him. If Ethan told a joke, she'd laugh louder than everyone else. If I walked away to help in the kitchen, somehow those two were always still talking when I came back. I brushed it off. I kept telling myself, she's just friendly. Because that's what trust looks like. You don't automatically assume betrayal. About a year before our wedding, Ethan proposed during a weekend trip to a quiet lakeside town. It wasn't flashy. No photographers hiding behind bushes. No flash mob. Just the two of us standing on a wooden dock while the sun was setting. He got down on one knee, pulled out a simple diamond ring, and asked if I'd spend the rest of my life with him. I cried. He cried. Some elderly couple walking by even started clapping. For months afterward, I honestly believed I was the luckiest woman alive. Wedding planning became my entire personality. Pinterest boards, guest lists, cake tastings, venue tour, color palettes. I saved every extra dollar I could. I skipped vacations, stopped ordering takeout, worked overtime whenever it was available, not because anyone forced me to, because I wanted our wedding to be beautiful. Meanwhile, Ethan kept saying, "Don't stress so much. It's just one day." Funny how someone who said it was just one day had no problem throwing away 4 years together. Around that same time, Chloe suddenly became incredibly interested in helping. She offered to go dress shopping with me. She wanted updates on every wedding decision. She volunteered to organize my bridal shower. She even insisted on helping me choose flowers. Everyone thought I was lucky to have such a supportive cousin. So did I. There was one moment that sticks with me now. I walked into my apartment one evening after work. Ethan was sitting on the couch scrolling through his phone. The second he heard me unlock the door, he flipped the screen over so quickly that it almost fell onto the floor. When I joked, "What are you hiding?" "Planning a surprise honeymoon." He laughed a little too hard. "No, just work stuff." I believed him, because that's what people in love do. They believe. Weeks passed, then months. Little things started feeling off. Ethan suddenly spent more weekends helping friends. Chloe became strangely unavailable whenever I wanted to meet. Sometimes I'd text both of them on the same Saturday. Neither would answer for hours. Again, I explained it away. Life gets busy. Adults have responsibilities. Not every unanswered text means disaster. Then came Thanksgiving. That was the first crack in the perfect picture. Our entire family gathered at my aunt's house. The place was loud, chaotic, full of children running through the hallway and relatives arguing over football. At one point, I went upstairs looking for my jacket. As I walked past the guest bedroom, I heard laughter, Ethan's laughter, followed by Chloe's. I opened the door. The two of them were standing unusually close together looking at something on his phone. The second they saw me, they jumped apart, not dramatically, just enough for my stomach to notice. Chloe smiled first. "Oh, we were just looking at vacation ideas." I frowned. "What vacation?" she answered before Ethan could. "For you two, I thought it'd be fun." It sounded reasonable almost, but something about the atmosphere felt wrong, like I'd interrupted a conversation that wasn't meant for me. The drive home was awkward. I finally asked, "Do you think Chloe has been acting weird lately?" Ethan didn't even hesitate. "No, I think you're overthinking." That sentence. I think you're overthinking. It's amazing how often people use those words when they don't want to answer a question. After that, I started paying attention, not snooping, just noticing, every time Chloe posted on social media from a restaurant. Ethan somehow wasn't available that evening. If Ethan said he was working late, his location was mysteriously turned off. Whenever I brought up wedding plans, he looked bored, but if Chloe texted during dinner, his phone lit up instantly. I kept telling myself I was imagining things until one Friday evening. That day changed everything. I got off work earlier than usual because a meeting had been canceled. I decided to surprise Ethan with his favorite takeout. I remember balancing 2 bags of food while trying to unlock the apartment door. The place was quiet, too quiet. I called his name, nothing. Then I heard voices coming from the bedroom. I smiled at first. I assumed maybe he was on a work call as I got closer. I heard Chloe laughing. My heart started beating so loudly that I could barely hear anything else. I pushed the bedroom door open. And in that single moment, 4 years of my life completely fell apart. The room went completely silent, not the kind of silence you get when people are simply caught off guard. The kind where everyone knows there's no believable explanation left. Ethan was standing beside the bed. Chloe was sitting on the edge of it. Neither of them looked like they expected me home. The takeout bags slipped out of my hands and hit the floor. The drinks tipped over and soda spread across the carpet. I barely noticed. I just stared at them, waiting for someone to say something that would magically make the scene make sense. Nobody did. Finally, Ethan rubbed the back of his neck and sighed. "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." That sentence hit me harder than anything else, not, "I'm sorry." It's not what it looks like. Just, "This isn't how I wanted you to find out." Find out what? That the 2 people I trusted most had been lying to me for months. Chloe stood up slowly. Her face looked pale, but not guilty, more uncomfortable, like someone caught cheating on a test. She whispered my name. I held up my hand. "No." She stopped talking immediately. I looked straight at Ethan. "How long?" He didn't answer. "How long?" He looked toward the floor. "About 6 months. 6 months, half a year of family dinners, wedding planning, venue tour, cake tastings, engagement photos, half a year of smiling in my face while living a completely different life behind my back." I laughed, not because anything was funny. Sometimes your brain laughs when it's trying not to fall apart. I looked at Chloe, my own cousin. She couldn't even meet my eyes. "It just happened." Almost laughed again. "It just happened." People love saying that, as if relationships are natural disasters, like 2 adults accidentally slipped on the same banana peel and ended up having an affair. I looked back at Ethan. "So every time you kissed me goodbye before work?" Silence. Every family dinner, silence. Every wedding appointment, nothing. He finally spoke. "Never meant to hurt you." I blinked. "What exactly was your plan?" More silence. "Were you going to marry me anyway?" He hesitated. That hesitation told me everything, because if the answer had been no, he would have said no immediately instead. He hesitated. I nodded slowly. "Need both of you to leave." Ethan frowned. "This is my apartment too." I pointed toward the door. "I don't care." He actually looked annoyed, as though I was making an already difficult situation harder for him. Eventually they left, together. I watched from my apartment window as they got into the same car. Neither of them looked back. I don't remember much after that. I called my boss and said I was sick. Then I spent the next 3 days lying on my couch. Friends kept calling. My mom knocked on my door. I ignored everyone. It's funny how heartbreak isn't dramatic most of the time. You don't spend every minute crying. Sometimes you just stare at the ceiling for hours because your brain can't process what happened. Eventually, I forced myself to start canceling wedding plans. That turned out to be almost as painful as the breakup itself. Calling the florist, calling the photographer, calling the venue, every conversation started exactly the same way. "Hi, I'd like to cancel my wedding reservation." Most people politely said they were sorry. Some stayed quiet for a moment. One florist even whispered, "Oh, honey." Before explaining the cancellation policy, some deposits were refundable, most weren't in total. I lost thousands of dollars, money I'd spent years saving. Money I could have used for a down payment on a house instead. It disappeared with a few phone calls. I kept expecting Ethan to at least offer to cover half the losses. After all, we had planned the wedding together. He never did, in fact. He disappeared completely, blocked my number, blocked my social media. It was as if I'd been erased from his life overnight. The only updates I got came through relatives, apparently. He and Chloe were spending time together. Apparently. They didn't mean for anyone to get hurt. Apparently, they'd fallen in love. Every sentence somehow made me the invisible person in the story, like my pain was just an unfortunate side effect. About 2 months later, I finally attended my first family gathering since everything happened. I almost didn't go, but my grandmother's birthday meant too much to me. I promised myself I'd stay for 1 hour, smile, eat cake, leave. Simple. The second I walked through the front door, conversation slowed. Not stopped, just slowed enough for me to notice. People smiled awkwardly. Some hugged me a little longer than usual. Others suddenly found the snack table fascinating. Everyone knew nobody knew what to say then. The front door opened again. In walked Ethan, right beside Chloe, holding hands. The room became so quiet that even the children stopped running around. I honestly think they expected me to create a scene instead. I picked up my paper plate, walked to another room, and started talking to my grandmother about her garden. I wasn't doing it for them. I was doing it for myself, because they weren't getting the satisfaction of watching me lose control. About 20 minutes later, Chloe came looking for me. Of course she did. She closed the kitchen door behind her. No, you hate me. I kept washing my coffee mug. She continued. But I hope someday we can be a family again. I turned off the faucet, looked her directly in the eyes, then calmly asked, "Were you thinking about family when you were sneaking around with my fiancé?" She opened her mouth, closed it again, then quietly walked away. That should have been the end of it. It would have been the perfect place for everyone to go their separate ways, except about 3 months later, I received an invitation in the mail, elegant cream-colored paper, gold lettering, my name written in beautiful calligraphy. I honestly thought it had been sent by mistake. Until I opened it, it was a wedding invitation. The bride, Chloe, the groom, Ethan, and if that wasn't unbelievable enough, a handwritten note fell out of the envelope. The note would change everything. I picked up the folded note. For a second, I actually wondered if it might be an apology. Maybe they had finally realized how much damage they'd caused. Maybe they wanted to make peace before getting married. I unfolded the paper. It read, "We know things have been difficult, but we'd really love for you to come. Family is important to us, and we hope we can all move forward." Read it twice, then a third time. Not once did it say, "I'm sorry." Once did it acknowledge what they'd done. It was as if our entire history had been reduced to things have been difficult. I laughed, folded the note back up, and tossed it into a drawer. I had no intention of going. A week later, my phone rang. It was my aunt, Chloe's mom. I almost didn't answer, but I figured ignoring her would only make things more awkward later. She sounded unusually cheerful. "Hi, sweetheart, did you get the invitation?" I did. "So, you'll be coming, right?" No, there was a brief pause. "Oh, are you sure?" "Sure." Another pause, then she said something that genuinely caught me off guard. "Well, Chloe's really hoping everyone can put the past behind them." I took a slow breath. "The past?" "Yes, there's no point holding on to old pain forever." Old pain. This had happened only a few months earlier. I replied as calmly as I could. "I'm not holding on to anything. I'm simply choosing not to attend." She sighed dramatically. "Just don't want the family to feel divided." That sentence bothered me more than anything else, because somehow the responsibility for keeping the family together had landed on me, not the two people who broke it apart. I politely ended the call. I thought that was the end of it. It wasn't. Over the next few weeks, more relatives started reaching out. One cousin texted me saying, "Life's too short to stay angry." An uncle said, "They're happy now. You deserve to be happy too." Even my mom gently asked, "Maybe you should go for your grandmother." Notice something: everyone wanted me to be the bigger person. No one seemed interested in asking Ethan or Chloe to take responsibility. I still refused. Then, about a month before the wedding, I got another phone call, this time. It was Ethan. I stared at his name on my screen for almost a full minute before answering. "Hello." His voice sounded strangely casual. "Thanks for picking up." I didn't respond. He cleared his throat. "No, this is awkward." "You think?" "I wanted to ask you something." I leaned back in my chair. "Go ahead." There was another pause. Then he said it. "So, we're a little over budget." I frowned. "What?" "Our wedding costs ended up being higher than expected." I honestly thought I had misunderstood him. "So, well," he laughed nervously. "You already paid deposits for the venue and some vendors before everything happened." My stomach dropped. He continued, "We were wondering if you'd be willing to transfer those bookings over to us, or help cover some of the remaining costs." For a few seconds, I couldn't speak. Not because I was emotional, because my brain genuinely couldn't process the level of audacity. He wasn't calling to apologize. He wasn't calling to check on me. He was calling to ask me to help fund the wedding between him and the cousin he'd left me for. I finally asked, "Are you serious?" I know it sounds, rushed to explain. We're trying to save money. Since you'd already spent so much on the original wedding, it just seemed practical. Practical, that was the word he chose. As though I were a budget spreadsheet instead of the woman he'd betrayed, I actually laughed, a real laugh this time. Ethan, yeah, I need you to listen very carefully. Okay, the answer is no. Silence, then he tried again. You don't even have to come to the wedding. I wasn't planning to. Helping us would really mean a lot. I shook my head even though he couldn't see me. It would mean a lot. To you, another silence, then his tone changed. You know, holding on to resentment isn't healthy. There it was. The guilt trip, because apparently refusing to pay for someone else's wedding meant I was the unreasonable one. I replied, respectfully, my savings are no longer your concern. Then I hung up. I figured that would finally settle everything. I was wrong. The next morning, I woke up to over a dozen missed calls. Most of them weren't from Ethan. They were from family, and judging by the messages waiting for me, someone had told a very different version of the story. I opened the first voicemail. It was from my aunt. She sounded upset. Sweetheart, I don't know why you're making this so difficult. Chloe said Ethan only asked if you'd consider transferring the old bookings, and you completely blew up at him. I just stared at my phone. Blew up. I'd been calm the entire conversation. The second voicemail came from another relative. Think everyone needs to compromise. Compromise? I wasn't negotiating a seating chart. These people wanted me to help pay for the wedding of the man who cheated on me. With my own cousin, then the texts started coming in. It's just money. The bigger person. Family should help family. You're doing well financially. They need the help more than you do. That last one almost made me laugh, apparently, because I'd worked overtime, skipped vacations, and saved every extra paycheck. My savings had become community property. I decided I wasn't going to defend myself through 20 different phone calls. If people wanted to believe a made-up story, they were free to. I muted the family group chat and went to work. For about a week, things were quiet. Then my mom called. Her voice was hesitant. I just got off the phone with your grandmother. I immediately paid attention. Is she okay? She's fine. A pause, but she's worried. About what? She thinks the family is falling apart. That hurt, because my grandmother was the one person I never wanted caught in the middle. Mom continued. She doesn't want you to pay for anything. Let out a small sigh of relief. But there was always a but. She hopes everyone can sit down and talk before the wedding. I agreed to one meeting, not because I expected anything to change, but because I wanted this drama to end. The following Saturday, we met at my aunt's house. It felt less like a family gathering and more like a mediation. My parents were there, my aunt and uncle, my grandmother, a few older relatives, and, of course, Ethan and Chloe. No one looked particularly happy to be there. My grandmother spoke first. I don't want anyone yelling. Everyone nodded, then she turned to Ethan. Explain. The first time in months, every eye in the room was on him. He cleared his throat. We're just trying to keep wedding costs under control. My grandmother nodded slowly, and he looked confused. And we thought maybe the existing deposits could be transferred. She looked at him for a long moment. Using whose money? He hesitated. Hers. Grandma nodded again. So you want the woman you betrayed to financially support your wedding. Room became very quiet. Ethan shifted uncomfortably. When you say it like that, Grandma interrupted him. How else should I say it? No one spoke. Then Chloe finally jumped in. We weren't trying to hurt anyone. Grandma looked at her. Were you trying to protect her? Silence. Were you honest with her? Silence. Either of you apologize? More silence. I honestly wanted to hug my grandmother right then. She wasn't yelling. She wasn't insulting anyone. She was simply asking questions they couldn't answer. Finally, my aunt stepped in. Mom, what's done is done. Grandma nodded. Right. Everyone seemed relieved. Then she added, and because it's done, they should stop asking her for money. Room froze. Even my aunt looked surprised. Grandma turned toward me. You owe them nothing. Just hearing someone say those words lifted a weight off my shoulders. For months, I'd been treated like I was selfish for saying no. Finally, someone acknowledged reality. I thanked my grandmother. I stood up, and I genuinely thought the meeting was over. That's when Ethan made one last attempt. He looked directly at me. So that's it. I blinked. What do you mean? You're really going to let this destroy the family forever? I couldn't believe what I was hearing. I asked him quietly, who destroyed it? He opened his mouth. Nothing came out. I picked up my bag, looked around the room, then said something I'd been holding in for months. I didn't end our relationship. I looked at Ethan. I didn't lie. Then I looked at Chloe. I didn't betray my family. Finally, I looked at everyone else. So if this family feels broken. I paused. You're looking at the wrong person. You could have heard a pin drop. Nobody argued, nobody stopped me. I simply walked out the front door. As I got into my car, my phone buzzed. It was a text from my grandmother, just one sentence. Keep your peace. Don't let anyone purchase it with your guilt. I still have that message saved, and no, I didn't pay for a single flower, not one chair. Not one plate, not $1. As for the wedding, let's just say, I found out afterward that trying to build a marriage on betrayal came with consequences neither of them expected. A few weeks passed, life finally started feeling quiet. For the first time in months, my phone wasn't buzzing with relatives trying to convince me to be understanding. Work was going well. I started going to the gym again. I even took a weekend trip by myself. It wasn't some dramatic finding myself vacation. I just needed to be somewhere that didn't remind me of wedding venues and family drama. Then the wedding day came. You'd think I'd spend the whole day wondering what they were doing. Honestly, I forgot it was happening until around lunchtime. I was grocery shopping when one of my friends texted me. Thinking of you today, hope you're okay. I looked at the message for a second before smiling. I actually am. That surprised even me. Instead of crying, I went home, ordered my favorite food, watched terrible reality TV, and went to bed early. The next morning, I woke up to complete chaos. My phone had over 40 notifications, family group chats, private messages, missed calls. At first, I panicked. I thought something had happened to my grandmother instead. The wedding had become the family's biggest topic of conversation. Apparently, several relatives had spent the entire reception asking the same question. Where's she? Meaning me. Some guests genuinely assumed I decided not to attend at the last minute. Others already knew the truth. According to one cousin who later told me everything, the atmosphere became awkward every time someone asked how the bride and groom had met. Because there really wasn't a version of the story that sounded good. They couldn't exactly say, oh, they fell in love while he was engaged to her cousin. So they avoided the question, changed the subject, or gave vague answers. Even then, I stayed out of it. I wasn't interested in revenge. I wasn't calling people to gossip. I wasn't posting cryptic quotes online. I wanted distance. Then, about a month later, my cousin Lily invited me out for coffee. Lily had stayed completely neutral during the entire situation. She never pressured me, never defended Ethan or Chloe. She simply listened. As soon as we sat down, she leaned across the table. Never guess what's happening. I laughed. I don't even want to guess. She lowered her voice anyway. Fighting. I raised an eyebrow. Already, she nodded. Apparently, money. I almost choked on my coffee. The same money they wanted from me, pretty much. She explained that the wedding had cost far more than they expected. Without my old deposits or savings to cushion the expenses, they had put a surprising amount on credit cards. Now the bills were arriving, and suddenly, the honeymoon glow wasn't so bright. I listened quietly, not because I enjoyed hearing it, but because it confirmed something I'd learned the hard way. Problems don't disappear just because two people decide they're in love, especially when the relationship begins with dishonesty. A few days later, I ran into Ethan completely by accident. I was leaving a bookstore. He was walking toward the entrance. For a split second, we both froze. He looked different, more tired. The confident smile he used to wear all the time was gone. He gave me a small nod. Hi. Neither of us moved. Finally, he said, "You look good." "Thanks." Another awkward silence, then he surprised me. Been meaning to apologize. I waited. I'm sorry for how everything happened. I appreciated hearing the words, but something felt incomplete, so I asked for what? He blinked. Hurting you? I nodded. Then I asked the question that had been sitting in the back of my mind for months. Are you apologizing because you understand what you did? I paused. Or because your life isn't turning out the way you expected? His expression changed immediately. He didn't answer. He didn't have to. The silence answered for him. I wished him well. Then I walked away, not because I'd forgiven him, not because I'd forgotten, but because I realized something important. Closure isn't something another person gives you, sometimes. Closure is realizing they no longer have the power to affect your peace. About 6 months later, my grandmother invited me over for dinner. After everyone finished eating, she handed me a small envelope. Inside was a check. I looked at her in confusion. "Grandma, I can't take this," she smiled. "It's not from me." "Isn't?" She shook her head. Some relatives heard what really happened after that family meeting. I frowned. They felt embarrassed. I looked back at the check. Several family members had quietly contributed money, not because I asked, but because they believed I shouldn't have carried the financial loss alone. I actually started crying. Not because of the money, because someone had finally acknowledged the truth without asking me to sacrifice my dignity first. I accepted it with gratitude, and I used every rupee exactly how I'd originally planned, not on a wedding, on myself. I booked the solo trip I'd postponed, started rebuilding my savings, and little by little, I stopped seeing myself as the woman who got left behind. Instead, I became the woman who walked away without compromising her self-respect. Looking back now, losing Ethan felt like the worst thing that could have happened. But if he'd married me while secretly wanting someone else, that would have been much worse. Sometimes the biggest betrayal also saves you from the biggest mistake. So no, I didn't pay for their wedding. I didn't attend. And I didn't apologize for protecting my own peace, because some things are expensive, but your self-respect should never be one of them.